Hey everyone, this is going to be a talk on the connection between cognition and entropy. Now, entropy is a fundamental concept of the universe, of physics, and of information theory. It's completely connected to almost, if not everything. So it's no surprise that it also connects to cognition, especially since entropy is like the fundamental aspect of information theory, and cognition is all about processing information. So there's a huge connection, and I'm sure I only just scratched the surface here. But let's get started. First off, I noticed that most of you guys watching are not subscribed. So if you want to be alerted about content, subscribe. Enough said. Let's get into it. So in the first part, we're going to start with a general understanding of entropy, just from a physics standpoint, just so that we can all get this understanding, just in case. I'm sure some of you don't know what entropy is, and if you do, it's a good review. I'm going to put a link in the description to skip ahead to the second part of the first part, entropy and cognition. After that, I could just present you with the cognitive model that I developed, but I want to take you through the process I did and what comes out of the cognitive model. And then third, I'm going to talk about a couple of blaster things about information flow. And then I have a comment from Demon Windu that he left in one of my other videos. And this is just basically the theory in order to respond to him as well, so we can get to him in the end. Okay, so entropy, a review. Entropy is just a quantitative way to measure chaos, okay? And what it is it's this third thing, right? It's proportional to the number of possible states in a system. So the more possible configurations there are in a system, the higher the entropy, the more the chaos, right? And so here we have this plate, for example. So the plate, when it's whole, it has one state. It's a very rare state. It's not the normal state of a plate. When you break the plate, it can break in so many different possible ways, and it can keep breaking and keep breaking. There's so many different configurations. So when the plate is broken, the entropy goes up because it has more possible states. When the plate is whole, then the entropy is lower because it has one possible state. Okay? It's a character of energy and information. So in this case, mass is energy, but also entropy, it's the randomness of information, right? A very random white noise, for example, is a random information. It has a very high entropy. A computer program, software that was carefully crafted is very low entropy, right? So the other thing is it's an inverse quantity, okay? So that means, like, you'll see here, I'm talking about low entropy is higher. Low is high, low is high. It's sort of labeled a bit wrong, okay? Before we get into that, we have 3 laws of thermodynamics, just so you know how all pervasive it is in the universe. There's laws like conservation of energy. Energy is not created or destroyed. The second law is entropy of a system increases with time. So this is the one that's really most relevant to us. And then the third one is entropy approaches a constant minimum at absolute zero. So as temperature approaches absolute zero, nothing moves, there's no more change, and entropy gets some kind of minimum. Okay, so just as a general understanding, so lower entropy means higher predictability and certainty, right? The plate is predictable when it's at a low entropy. When it's a solid plate, it's predictable, it's certain. We know what it's going to be from one state to the next. Yeah, the atoms inside are jiggling a little bit. There's a little bit of variation in it, right? Okay, there's sound waves going through it. Okay, but it's still very predictable. Okay, when you break it, it's unpredictable. We don't know how it's going to break. We can't predict how it's going to break because it's an entropic process. It's going up in entropy, right? So a lower entropy is also higher energy and information density. Okay, so the more dense the information is, the lower the entropy. So you see, once we break the plate, it's less dense. It's in shards. It's separated. The energy is spread out, right? Okay, so same thing here. This is a diagram of energy that's spread out, and it says high randomness, high entropy, high disorder. Okay, and then as it gets more and more dense, it has a lower entropy. Same thing with now. In water, the solid is a bit less dense than the liquid, but it still has a lower entropy because of the structure that it gets, and we'll talk about that too. But there's a structure element to entropy. So solid, I guess, is the lowest entropy of the three states. Then there's liquid, and then there's gas is a very high entropy. It's very spread out. It's very random. It's very chaotic. Solid is very ordered and structured. So we talked about the information density. A lower entropy is higher order, higher complexity, higher structure, more fine-tuned, right? Lower entropy is also a higher potential for a system to perform work, okay? So a battery, for example, okay? So a battery, when it's charged, the energy is separated. It's a lower entropy because it's separated in a way that is not randomly distributed. It's ordered, it's sorted, right? The positive charges are on one side, the negative charges are on the other. If you allow time to progress, the positive and negative will mix, and there will be a higher entropy, more chaos. So it's more ordered and structured that the battery is separate, and that means there's a higher potential for it to perform work. The battery can actually do something because it wants to increase in entropy. It wants to become a higher entropy, quote unquote, right? Lower entropy is also a higher information gradient. Okay, so this is sameness is wrong here. It's a carryover from a previous version. But sameness is a high entropy. So when there's a very high entropy, you see everything ends up being spread out even, right? Say there's a smell in the room, right? You spray some perfume. Okay, so the perfume is very concentrated at one point. That's a low entropy. That's not, if you let the perfume molecules in the air for millions of years, it's really rare that they'll all be concentrated at one point, right? They'll spread out. So that's the gradient. When there's no gradient, everything is the same. You can't really smell the perfume because it's all spread out. Okay. When it's not the same, when there's one scent here and then the rest of the air is no longer scented, that's when there's a difference. That's when there's a gradient, and that's when there's a lower entropy. It's rare. It's more rare for that configuration in the room to exist. Okay. Now let's talk about entropy in the universe. So at the Big Bang, we have the lowest possible entropy. The universe will never return to the state at the Big Bang. It just will never happen. We can wait forever. It's just a super low chance that it's negligibly impossible, right? That sentence didn't make sense, but you get what I mean. So, and then entropy, it's a law of the universe that we said here, entropy of a system increases with time. So if you take the entire system as the universe, entropy will increase. It'll get more spread out. It'll get more the same, right? Less dense, right? All of these things are going to go. It's going to be the opposite of all of this, right? Now, eventually we'll get to the heat death where everything is the same. There's no motion. Nothing will change. Everything is all completely spread out, and then everything as we know it will cease to exist, right? But as we are at this moment, the heat death is at an infinite time. We'll never actually reach the heat death because it takes an infinite amount of time to get there. And we'll never actually see back to the 0 point because it's also impossible to see anyways. So the fact that space expands and time is going forward is what allows entropy to increase, right? As a fundamental. And so you see, this is the opposite, entropy decreasing, and this is entropy increasing with time, okay? Now that said, the second law says entropy of a system increases with time. We permit entropy to go down as long as overall it's going up, right? So, you know, if you go to a casino, for example, and you start betting money, well, some people might come out winners. Okay, some people come out of the casino and they've won, they beat the odds, but overall, the casino is winning. Okay, and that's the same sort of idea. Overall, entropy is going up. You can't avoid it. Okay, some events might happen that reduce entropy, and that's why we exist, and we'll see that here. So, okay, the energy transfer, the entropy gradient, it's the efficiency. Okay, so basically, entropy will go up no matter what, but it will go down in some way when you're transferring energy, right? So we're making this low entropy go to here, but we're losing some of that. Entropy is still going up, and that's why we have efficiency ratings on energy, right? On transferring energy. A lot of it is lost to heat. A lot of it is lost to light. A lot of it is lost to sound, right? All of this stuff is high entropy loss. It's stuff we can't get back, right? So stars are another example. So stars overall, they're producing so much heat. They're spreading all the energy across the universe. All this light, all this heat is going out. But even though the system is going up, the inside the star, there's nuclear fusion, right? So you go back here, you see, okay, so we've got these hydrogen atoms, okay, and the hydrogen atoms are getting compact and crushed together, and they're forming these heavier elements, these heavier atoms. So helium and eventually iron is all formed from this process of fusion inside the star. And this process has to release more entropy than goes down. Okay, life was quoted by Václav Havel. I probably botched that name, as the struggle against entropy, right? Life wants to die. Life will die, right? Decay and death and spreading our structure into dust is the path of the universe. It's what will happen. We will become dust and earth and spread out, right? So our struggle for life day in and day out to stay alive is a struggle against entropy. It's trying to keep our structure, trying to keep our order intact. And eventually entropy wins. Eventually our destiny is death, right? So Václav Havel, interesting guy. He was, I don't know if he was a physicist or not, but he was the last president or prime minister of Czechoslovakia and the first of the Czech Republic. He's a poet. He wrote philosopher, very interesting guy. Talks a lot about the truth. So he's the source of this quote. The first life, for example, is a very rare event, very low entropy event, right? For amino acids to combine in just the right way, for the planet to sit in the Goldilocks zone, for our sun to be perfect, for the water, for all of the conditions of this first life is so rare. We don't expect it to happen often in the universe, right? We expect it to happen, just not very often, very rarely. It's a low entropy event, okay? Now, overall, entropy is going up throughout the entire universe to allow this rare event to occur, right? But it's still rare, okay? Plants are an example of something that is reducing entropy, right? They're taking light, they're taking carbon dioxide, which is a gas. They're taking water, which is a liquid. Okay, and they're releasing. Okay, they're releasing O2, but really they're organizing the molecules and into a structure, which becomes organic compounds like sugars, proteins, amino acids. Right? They're organizing all of these atoms into organic structures, which becomes a type of organized fuel, a low entropy fuel that can then later be consumed, right? So yeah, we're consuming all kinds of plants. We're consuming animals that consume plants, right? For us, we need a lot of this organic compounds. If we were to sit in the sun all day and we wouldn't be able to run our brain, we wouldn't be able to run our organs, right? We need a lot of fuel to function. We can't be plants and function as humans. We need a whole bunch of plants to gather all of this light. It's already high entropy light, and it's taking this high entropy and reducing the frequency of light. It's taking so little entropy from the light and using it over long periods of time to create these organic compounds, right? So yeah, overall, it's increasing the frequency of light. It's increasing entropy over many years in order to produce fruit, in order to produce leaves and structure and reproduce and all that kind of stuff. So animal life we talked about is growth versus natural decay, right? Animals growing is the struggle against entropy, and the natural decay, the death, is just letting go to entropy and just being spread out. It requires lots of low entropy fuel. We said that, okay, for it to succeed. Now, machines and computers, for example, that's not their natural configuration. If you wait millions of years, they will also be spread out, right? How did they get into these structures, right? And this is low entropy. If we were to go to a planet and find a car, well, we would say, okay, this is rare. This car should not exist. Why is this car in this configuration? Well, obviously something had to produce this car. There had to be some civilization that reduced its entropy over time, that got some kind of industrial revolution, that got some kind of understanding of physics and engineering, and very fine-tunedly created this car that works. It's a long process of reducing entropy over generations and generations to produce this, right? It just doesn't occur naturally. We just don't find cars on planets. Okay. Yeah, there is a chance. There is a probability that it happens, but it's just so incredibly rare, right? And then another metaphor, pregnancy is not just a metaphor, but I like to think of it as a metaphor because it's really the entire idea of entropy is captured in stars, and pregnancy are very similar. So it's a very slow process. It's very ordered. It's reducing entropy and it's creating structure. It's creating over long periods of time, taking all of this food that you're eating and creating a new life with a brain and with cells, and just the entire process is creating this very complicated low entropy structure. Now, to create such a low entropy structure, you need a lot of entropy to increase, right? And that's why it takes so long. And you can't increase the entropy too quick. You can't heat it up too quick, otherwise it'll just die, right? It's got to grow over time and get the structure over time, right? And so that's the whole idea of pregnancy. And also with civilization, for example, our civilization, as we evolve, we can't just jump there. We can't just be complete and perfect human organization, right? Let's say we were to go back in time today, right? How long would it take for us to give over all of our knowledge to the past civilization so that they get here? Just so long, like so many generations for them to organize themselves in a way that is similar to our low entropy society today, right? So it happens over time. We have huge revolutions and we have groundbreaking ideas in every domain, in physics and technology, right? You need in computers, right? The whole idea is, well, you need computers to make computers. There's the whole idea of Moore's law, that computers over time keep getting better and better, right? We're reducing the entropy over time, over and over again, right? We can't just start with the computers we had today. We had to start with the old ones, and we have to evolve and reduce our entropy to get to the better technology, the better physics, the better science, everything, right? It takes long periods of time for us to fine tune our civilization to get there. Okay, so now I'm going to get into cognition. So cognition, I said, is information processing. Now, high entropy processes are going to be processed by the extroverted functions. That's the job. The extroverted functions are here. We all have them. They're all processing the high entropy information, okay? The introverted functions are what's going to process the low entropy information, okay? So just a little quick 2 lines. High entropy information is unpredictable. It's random. There's too many possible states, right? And that's why we need our extroverted functions to process them, because it's constantly changing. It's constantly unpredictable. We need to update, right? Whereas the low entropy, it's predictable. It's formulaic. It's not changing. We know what's going to happen, right? So I put a star here because we have the Navier-Stokes equations down here. Now, the Navier-Stokes equations are from fluid dynamics or fluid mechanics, which is one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult area of physics today. Now, it's not extravagant like string theory or quantum physics or astrophysics, right? It's not like this it's not this high extravagant, oh, I want to do this. It's the nitty gritty. There's an open $1 million prize for anyone who could, like, this is just a couple of the equations, who can solve the equations and add to these equations, right? And what it is it's high entropy systems. It's trying to predict, right? We said it's hard to predict. It's too random, too unpredictable. And these are the equations that govern this high entropy system. And so, yeah, they're unsolved. It's really difficult. And that's like, for example, they're used in meteorology. So it's really hard to predict the weather because weather is such a high entropy system and it's so unpredictable, right? Now, also uniform information, mundane, sameness, or chaos, right? Whereas opposed to specialized, unique, and fine-tuned information, right? So the extroverted functions are gonna look for these subtle nuances in the uniformity of things, right? They're going to look for this at this randomness, and the introverted functions are gonna fine-tune over time, get more and more refined, and create this worldview over time, right? So the extroverted functions are more objective versus subjective. They're more impersonal because it's I'm not building something for myself. I'm trying to deal with this high entropy situation that's going on, and it's more public. It's shared. We work together to try to solve the high entropy information. Whereas the low entropy is subjective. It's each person has their own unique functions that they're fine tuning. They're dealing with this low entropy information, right? It's personal, it's private. We come to conclusions over years, over generations, right? We said low entropy takes time. It's like this pregnancy. It's like this this plant that's making sugars over time, right? It's developing. So we need to gather the high entropy information somehow. So we need these extroverted functions to deal with the high entropy and convert it and reduce it to low entropy, right? To make this timeless situation universal worldview, right? Whereas this one is more immediate. It's more situation specific, and this is more universal to all situations. It's this pervasive worldview. So generally, the high entropy is going to be really similar, all the same, and the functions are going to be trying to deal with all of the little nuances in this sameness, this high entropy situation, right? Whereas on the other side, there's not much change. It's more predictable. So what's consistent? What's reproducible? What will keep? What are we refining? Right? It's like fine tuning. We're fine tuning our worldview over time. So now this is really interesting. When I looked at all of the functions individually, I thought, okay, so we have high entropy sensory and we have low entropy sensory. So they should be opposite, right? High entropy sensory versus, well, it didn't work out that way. I really tried to put SI versus SE. It didn't work. SE went versus NI. For some, at least in the domain of entropy, for some reason, these are the opposites in entropy. So SE, for example, we have this detailed representation of reality, of physical information. And then the NI is going to reduce that, okay? The NI is going to narrow down and generalize that detailed representation. So this is the high entropy versus low entropy right from the textbook. NE is looking at uncertainty, randomness, the variations in versus the similarities in these. It's going to notice all of these differences. It's the similarities are going to blend into the background, right? It's going to notice the variations in the similarities. So, and opposite to that, opposite to the uncertain and the randomness is the certainty. It's the structure. It's the sequence. It's the order of the SI. FE is looking at homogeneity, right? It's looking at it's looking across the board of values, of priorities, and looking at what's the same between everyone. What are the subtle differences in the tribe? It's going to pick up on the subtle differences. It's going to pick up on the tears, on the big differences, right? It's always in motion, right? It's hard to put your finger on it because it's always changing, and it's gonna pick up on this. Whereas the opposite to this homogeneity is a structure. It's something that's not homogeneous. It's something that's separate. It's something that's built up. Same thing. TE is going to be unsorted, unbiased. It's letting the best ideas rise to the top. There's no bias on the ideas. We're throwing ideas around, right? Whereas there is going to be a bias to the ideas on the FI side. They're going to be sorted based on preference, based on priority, right? So these are also quite opposite. Now I'm just going to touch a little bit on the delusion of our functions. So obviously, the delusion of the high entropy is that it's going to think it's objective. Nothing is objective. We're all subjective. Even if you were to take the entire, let's say we take all of physics from the 17th century that all believed in a certain way of physics, right? They believe they're objective. And then someone comes and shatters their objective, right? Later on, we get these world-changing ideas, right? Because people are stuck in this delusion that we're objective and we know everything, when it's not true, right? Or when we're trying to compare things in objectivity and we're getting there slowly. Whereas, I got a lot on this, but I want to skip ahead. Whereas the delusion for the introverted functions is this hubris, is this pride, and saying, I am the authority on this. Where we're all delusional. We're not really seeing reality in an objective way. It's just our hubris, right? Who says you're the authority on this? Who says you get to decide what's important? Who says what you get to decide what the best sequence is, right? Now, the high entropy extroverted functions are going to have this subjective worldview. They're going to question and update the subjective worldview. They're going to question the subjective worldview of everyone around them. They're going to question their own subjective worldview, right? And they're going to update that subjective worldview. They're going to try to stay as objective as possible. They're going to, it's not going to like this subjective nature of our worldview. It's going to want to try to consolidate worldview between people, right? Whereas on the introverted side, it's going to enjoy the subjective worldview. It's going to form it over time. It's going to refine it, right? It's going to go off on its own direction. It's going to have faith and certainty, and it'll be static, right? So each one is going to have a stagnation, right? And each one is going to have a progress. So the stagnation of the objective side is it's just going to accept the objective worldview as is. This is what it is. This is what everyone believes. Society is perfect as it is. We should not change. We shouldn't change anything, right? This is this stagnation, okay? And on the other side, the stagnation is people on the subjective side that might be stuck in their own subjective worldview. This should be. I'm not going to move. I'm going to stagnate. I'm not going to accept reality as it is. I'm not going to accept objectivity because this is what should be. I'm not moving. And so that's a place where stagnation occurs as well. And progress is going to be, it's just the same thing. We're going to meet in objectivity, right? We're going to have this unified direction. We're going to actually be able to progress as a society because we're meeting in this objective way. We're getting on the same page. We're seeing the same things, right? We're agreeing on things, and that's where the progress comes from. And the same thing from the subjective side. It's this worldview. It's this subjective worldview. We have this utopian ideal. We deny the momentary objectivity. So let's bring an example, Martin Luther King Jr., right? So he was in society. He saw that, objectively, there's a segregation in society. This is just the way things are, right? He could have just accepted it. Or he could have said, no, I've got a dream that all people are created equal. I have a dream that people shouldn't be judged based on the color of their skin, right? And this is his utopian ideal. This is this lower entropy thing that brings about human rights to the world, which is like this huge pedestal of advancement, right? Now, yeah, he saw that this is something that society was ready to accept, and he was pushing it on, but he had to refine the worldview. He had to step out of what the world is and see what the world should be. So what the world should be is the source of stagnation and the source of progress. And here, what the world is the source of stagnation and progress. So that's the game of society. How do we reduce entropy? How do we go down in entropy as time progresses, right? How do we not stagnate? How do we progress? And usually something has to come and shake up the world in order for us to realize, hey, we've been stagnating. We weren't ready for this. Okay, so that's where cognition comes in information progress. Now let's talk about the cognitive model that comes out of this, okay? So we have this Big Bang model. Yeah, low entropy, high entropy, the heat death, the arrow of time. This is how time progresses, okay? Now, let's take our time somewhere in the middle between the heat death and the Big Bang. So here, we put our time here. Our cognition is here, okay? We're at this time. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put the low entropy on the inside. We're going to change this so the arrow of time is now going like this. The arrow of time is going from the inside of the circle outwards. The heat death is on the outside, right? The high entropy and heat death, and the Big Bang is on the inside, okay? The low entropy. And our time is somewhere in between, okay? We're on this ring here, okay? And so this is how time progresses. Now, what we're going to do actually is do an inversion. Now, I've got a link in the description to what an inversion is a circular inversion. We're going to use it again later in the model. But basically what we're doing is we're taking the 0 point, the center of the circle, and putting it at the infinite, the heat death. So now this is the infinite point. The Big Bang is on the outside, right? You see the arrow is switched. Time goes this way now. So the low entropy is now on the outside, and the high entropy is on the inside, okay, based on this inversion. Now that we've done that, okay, so that we have the arrow going inside, right? We have time going forward. We have our past civilization on the outside with the Big Bang, and our future civilization on the inside. So this is the entropy going down, and this is the entropy going up, right? And this is now our new model. So as time progresses, entropy increases for the whole universe, right? As a whole, we get closer to the heat death, but decreases for civilization. So an example of this is, say someone from a past civilization were to come, let's do the opposite. Let's say we were to go to a past civilization, right? We have this low entropy worldview that we've absorbed even objectively, right? We've objectively absorbed this worldview. And we go to the past, well, okay, the objective worldview there is completely different. And we know, okay, well, there's slaves. Slaves shouldn't be. There's no technology. People are dying in their 20s, right? We've gone to a higher entropy civilization. We haven't refined it down yet, and so we're going to clash with this civilization because we have this low entropy worldview, right? And so this is what cognition does. Cognition is taking this. Okay, we've got this status quo. Let's try to refine it and see what the future could be. Let's try to get to a future civilization. Let's evolve to something that is a lower entropy, something that is more fine-tuned, where our lives could be better, right? This is the whole progress of civilization. So that's the low entropy on the inside. So now we can have our introverted functions on the inside that are going to deal with the low entropy information, okay? And our extroverted functions on the outside that's going to deal with the high entropy information. And this sort of bubble, okay, this sort of film on the bubble is where the two meet, right? So oftentimes, as a TI user, I would meet TE users, and we would meet somewhere here where like this high entropy information meets the low entropy information on this surface here, where we're able to, right? TE doesn't really see what's going on the inside. TI doesn't really see what's going on the whole high entropy spectrum, but we can meet, we can agree here on this surface, and this is where we agree. So this is just a way I've been thinking about our cognition as like these bubbles where some of us are inside and we're looking out, and some of us are outside and we're looking in, right? Now, so say we take all of information, okay, all information. We have all high entropy information, we have all low entropy information, and we have our introverted functions on the inside and our extrovert on the outside. So cognition allows us to perceive ourselves as separate entities from the universe, right? It's a delusion. We're not separate from the universe. We're one and the same, right? And we're able to reduce our entropy from the universe, right? The universe wants us to have this high entropy. We're able to reduce it. We're able to understand the universe because we're getting a more narrow worldview. So this cognition, this membrane of cognition, is what's keeping our worldview intact and what's allowing us to deal with the high entropy information. Okay, it's like this cell membrane, right? So the cell, at the same time, there's the membrane on the cell. You have all these organelles on the inside of the cell that are low entropy organelles, right? The universe doesn't favor cells. Cells should be dead, and all of this stuff should go outside. And it's the membrane that protects the low entropy structure within the cell, right? And the membrane allows high entropy into the cell for the cell to use it as fuel or to manipulate it. And the membrane allows things to go out, all of the waste and the high entropy waste to go out of the cell. And so this membrane is what is sort of dealing physically with the cell. And so the same thing in our cognition, we have this cognitive membrane that is allowing high entropy information to come in and low entropy information to go out. And this is what the functions are actually doing. So it keeps the low entropy separate from the high entropy. That's what it does. And it protects the cell so that the parts don't bleed out. That's what we said. Okay, let's continue with our model. So, okay, so let's just take the 4 cardinal directions. Here we have feeling. We say the feeling is up, sensing is here, right? And then we can put our functions here. Okay, so on the right, we have intuition, right? And so now we've mapped our stuff. So this is the inner edge of our consciousness, right? And this is the outer edge of our consciousness, and this is the center line of our consciousness. So now we have all of the functions. This is the entire map of information in the universe that we're able to deal with, right? We have the low entropy information and the high entropy information, and it's separated, right? Because of our cognition. Our cognition is able to create a worldview, in essence. Without our cognition, we have no worldview. We have no low entropy mind, okay? And we have no way to deal with high entropy. If there's no low entropy, we can't deal with the high entropy, right? One is dependent on the other. And the separation is important. Okay, so now this is from my old model, right? So this is exactly, I put the quadra here. So this is the alpha quadra where we have TI, FE, and SI, NE. This is this side here. So TI is down, FE is up, SI is left, NE is right. So we have all of the quadra here, all of the types within the quadra as well. And this is my old model, and my old model maps perfectly onto the new model here, okay? It's the new way that I'm thinking of cognition. Now, if we wanted to completely map it, there's a flaw in my old model. The alpha quadra perfectly maps, but you'll notice the other quadra don't, right? This is my old model. You'll see SI is here. This is alpha, sorry. You see NI is here where these are reversed, NISE. So basically we reverse them around, we flip them all around, and we plop down the circle, and this is exactly my old cognitive model and how it maps onto the new one, basically, just for information purposes. Okay, so now what comes out of this model? So let's talk about the animals. So an idea is, I guess, let's say consume, right? So this is my consume. I've got this high entropy SE, and my TI is deciding which of the high entropy, it's on the membrane, which of the high entropy is coming in, right? So TI, in essence, is doing a filtration job. It's keeping out it's like this membrane. It's keeping out the high entropy information that I don't want, and it's letting in the high entropy information that I do want. And in essence, consume is just creating high entropy chaos inside our worldview. So we want to be careful which information comes in, right? It's filtering the wheat from the chaff, for example, right? It's not making it into flour. It's not making it into bread yet. We're just getting the wheat inside, okay? So now what happens when we consume low entropy information, right? This is high entropy. Well, can we consume low entropy information? And so, for example, I'll talk about it later when I'm in part 3. But in essence, what I'm giving over here is low entropy information. It's information that's been processed that I'm able to give to you. Now, obviously, I have to increase the entropy a little bit for you to bring it in, right? I can't just give you my worldview here. I can't just connect my mind to your mind. I need to explain it. I need to express it in some kind of sensory or some kind of high entropy intuition or something for you guys to grasp it and bring it back into your own worldview, right? And obviously, you guys are filtering. You guys are saying, okay, what he said there was BS. What he said there was great. Let's let in only what we want to let in, and then we can, after that, organize it into a worldview, right? So after you've let stuff in, you might need to sleep. You might need to order, structure, and reduce the entropy in yourself that you've been letting in, right? Which is what sleep does. Sleep is reducing the entropy that's already inside. So you might already have low entropy, but you can even reduce it more, right? You can make more structures. You can make more, make it more narrowed down, right? Blast is going to project the low entropy information out to the world, right? So that's why it's said to be controlling, right? What does Blast do? It reduces the entropy in the world because you're getting this low entropy information out. You're controlling the world. You're making the world more lower entropy, more fine-tuned, right? You're let's say you have a group of people all doing random stuff. Someone with a blast comes and is like, hey, let's all do this one thing. And he's controlling the tribe in order to accomplish a task that's organizing people, right? So that's what blast does. It organizes the world around us. It takes this low entropy information and brings it out to reduce the entropy outside. So consume brings high entropy information in. Blast brings low entropy information out. Now, play is something I was struggling with, and 2 people helped me. We'll get to them. It deals with high entropy information outside of the self. Outsourcing sleep, we'll talk about why. It's going to match entropy states, right? Entropy flows from low to high, right? Entropy always goes up, right? So if we have this low entropy inside and this high entropy outside, it's gonna flow in, right? So we can increase our entropy in order to be at a similar entropy level, and then we can go up so that information goes in, or we can go down so that information goes out, and it's just this vibration at the entropy level of our surroundings so that information can fluctuate in and out very quickly, right? So now Thomas Eilot said, play takes action. So he's play first, right? So he's looking at play on as play. Now, what is he doing as play? He says, I can take action to shake information free, right? I can, let's say there's this guy over here and he's got a whole bunch of information in him. How am I going to get it out of him? I got to shake him. I got to get the information out somehow. So let's play with him. Let's poke at him. Let's get him to reveal some of that worldview that's inside him, and it'll spill out, right? That's what play does. It's shaking information out of things, right? And now Otim is coming from the opposite perspective. Otim is sleep first, right? So he says, okay, I need feedback. I'm shaking the low entropy information inside me to see where the holes are, where the voids are, where there's a little bit of movement, where I can still refine things, right? He's asleep. He wants to reduce the entropy. And in order to make it even lower, he's got to shake things up to see, hey, so here's what he says here. I've had to learn to get feedback because my sleep develops such distorted assumptions that would never know were distorted, that I would never know were distorted until I get the feedback, right? And so he's using play to help him process the sleep. And this is why I wrote outsourcing sleep. He's outsourcing the sleep a little bit. He's trying to see, hey, play with me, try to shake me up and see what's not solid yet, right? What I still need to sleep on more. And so he's coming at it from the exact opposite. Now, I put information density here. We'll talk about it a little later, but you'll notice that sometimes people are giving over a lot of dense information, and this is low entropy information. So the question is, where does this come from? Like, is it a long life of or a very low entropy worldview that now I can blast out, right? So it's an open question on just paying attention. It's something I'm going to pay attention to on how dense is the information that people are giving over, and where is it coming from? What parts is it coming from? And as we said, information density, we'll go all the way back, right? Information density is low entropy, right? Whereas if someone had a low, okay, let's continue. Okay, so here's the cognitive model again. Now, how do the animals play into here? I put a little map based on what's going on. This is literally what's happening from function to function, okay? And this is just more of an idea of what's happening. So BLAST is taking this just as a general idea of what the animals do. They're taking the low entropy, blasting it out. Same thing here. Play is taking this high entropy information and it's dealing with the high entropy information, letting it, interacting with it, shaking it around, right? Consume is taking this high entropy, bringing it in, and sleep is narrowing down, is pushing in, reducing entropy inside, okay? So it's just the way we can represent the animals on this model. Now we're done with the model. So that's how I developed the model. Now, I put here, okay, NF blast. So someone commented, I posted the model online, and someone said, hey, this is really NF blast. Okay, yeah, I get it. It looks NF, right? But it's grounded in the ST, right? And that's the thing. So because of the way my animals work, the information that I'm gathering is ST, and it's going to come out looking NF, but everything that's inside is ST. Now, what happened was, we'll get to it, but I was thinking, how does entropy go down over time through society, right? We need to learn from schools. We need to learn low entropy information, right? So let's just say at first we're using this as like containers. Okay, so let's use language as a metaphor. The highest entropy information are these letters. So we're gathering in letters. Okay, then we'll sleep on the letters. We'll turn them into words, and then we'll be able to blast out sentences. Okay. Now, when we're blasting out sentences, someone else can consume those sentences. Now, obviously, it's a metaphor. I can blast out how do you crack a coconut, right? I can blast that out. Someone had to figure it out. It had to be a part of someone's worldview. It's got to be taught. It's got to be passed on, right? So these are sentences, for example. Now we're consuming those sentences. We can sleep. We can turn them into paragraphs, and so on and so forth, right? And entropy will go down further and further as society progresses, as we're advancing. And this is how the animals, in essence, are reducing the entropy of society over time. And as a community, as a culture, as a society, we're able to preserve that low entropy by implementing schools and courts, and police. And I know police is a very heated issue at the moment, especially with how some of the police in the world have been acting. But I don't think anyone would, well, that's not true, but police are somewhat needed in society, in order to protect this chaos, this high entropiness, in order to safeguard our low entropy worldview, not at any cost, right? I'm with you guys. I know stuff needs to change 100%. We are definitely not at a low entropy state yet in the world. It's going to take many more thousands of years for us to keep refining society. So we have flaws, we have errors everywhere. I'm not arguing that. Okay. So back to what I was saying before, there's information containers, this NF blast that I had. So what am I doing when I'm gathering? What am I looking for? I'm looking for this ST truth, okay? When I'm gathering these boxes, I'm gathering these containers. Now, inside these containers, okay, there might be NF inside the containers. When I'm gathering, but if I see a completely NF container with no ST truth to it, I, with my functions, can't consume it. I need to find ST truth. I can't take these NF truths in. If there happens to be NF inside the container, well, that's great. Those are the gems. Those are the jewels that I can then later convert and create an NF blast out of, right? So what are we looking for? I'm looking for the ST truth. What am I comparing against? I'm comparing against other ST truths, right? What am I filtering out? I'm filtering out things that don't line up with my ST truth, right? Whereas an NF person is looking for these NF truths. They don't want these containers. What is this container? I don't want this. I want these NF containers. I need an NF truth. And on the inside of the NF containers, yeah, sure, there might be some ST. And then I can blast that ST, but that's not what I'm consuming, right? What will be blasted, right, in the end? And what's the conclusion versus the path to the conclusion, right? So yeah, I have to make sure, I have to do the work, the ST work, to make sure everything I'm consuming is ST true. And then that's the path I get to finally reducing the entropy and blasting it back out to the world in some kind of NF way. And so this is the idea of these dolls, is that, okay, so when I blast out my sentences, who's gonna consume them? Who's gonna consume this NF stuff, right? And it's someone with an NF gather, right? Obviously anyone can consume anything, anyone can blast anything. This is just a generality, okay? Now, a friend of mine has an NF consume. I think he's the ENFP. He sent me this video. The link is in the description. The person in the video is his twin type. I think he's an ENFP. They're very extreme. It's one of the most difficult things I've ever listened to in my life. It's just so hard. You can tell he's been gathering in these extreme NF truths that have nothing to do with my ST truth. I would have thrown them all out, but for him, he was gathering these NF truth, and he's trying to filter it and sort it and turn it into ST. He was just really bad at it. It's coming out very ST-like. It sounds very ST, but it's just really extreme NF that sounds ST. And it's something that it was suffering. I'm glad I did it. I got this understanding from it, but it was just really difficult for me to consume. And so there's another inversion that happens here. So this is something I didn't talk about. This is an inversion, right? You're inverting low entropy to high. This is an inversion, high to low, right? These aren't really doing an inversion. They're keeping the high high and the low low, but maybe they're reducing it. And maybe in order to reduce sleep, well, you've got to let entropy out somehow, right? Because entropy needs to increase overall. It could just be energy. It could just be burning energy, calories, right? But sleep takes a lot of energy, a lot of processing power, right? In order to reduce entropy. So this is an inversion. So the same thing here. In order to turn this box into this box, it's an inversion. In order to, I consume this and then I blast this, I'm inverting in and then I'm inverting back out, right? And so he's doing also notice that this guy is doing a lot of channel changing, which is a problem I'm having. You'll notice that the information I'm giving over, I spent weeks, months, and even you'll see later over a year processing this information, and it's still coming out very unorganized, very high entropy. It's this high entropy channel changing that's going on, right? I hope at least it's somewhat processable. So here's a metaphor I have for channel changing. So let's say you have 1 gig of data, right? So you can store it on 6,000 5¼ inch disks. You can store it on 695 3½ inch diskettes. You can store it on 2 CDs or 1 DVD. It's the same amount of information, but you're storing it on different media, right? So someone who's channel changing is like, hey, take this diskette, take this diskette, take this, right? Whereas someone with who's not channel changing is like, hey, I'm going to give you over all of the information, completely organized, beginning, middle, end. You don't need to process any of it because it's already organized. It's much nicer to receive that kind of highly processed information because you don't need to process. It's already processed for you, right? So the unorganized people like myself and like the person in this video that you'll see, it's just, I've learned so much. That's what they're saying. I have so much knowledge here. Take my knowledge, right? They're responsible not to modify the information. They don't want to create a conclusion. They're like, here, this is pure. Take my pure, unorganized information, right? That's what they're trying. It's just high entropy information. You are responsible to make your own conclusions. I'm just giving you all of the information that I made a conclusion out of. I hope you can make the same one, right? Whereas someone who's organized, they're not going to be like, hey, take this, take this, take this. They're like, hey, check this out. I'm not going to keep this pure. I'm not going to keep it unorganized. I'm going to organize it. I'm going to structure it. I'm I'm going to make the takeaway. I'm going to leave stuff out. I'm going to let stuff in. And I'm finally going to give over this information. It's not like, hey, here's this video. You know, everyone has these friends. Here, watch this, watch this, watch this. Even highly organized people say, watch this, right? Whereas someone who's organized, it's not like, hey, watch this. It's, hey, listen to this. I've processed this video. I'm going to tell you about it now, right? That's the blasters. I'll tell you about this one thing I consumed. Yeah, I left a whole bunch of stuff out. Yeah, I came to a whole bunch of conclusions, but it's all organized. Take. I've done it for you, right? So obviously, this 1 gig is just a metaphor because a lot of the info we might have filtered most of the info out, right? We might have even generated new info inside, right? So just generally, this is what it looks like. Take these diskettes versus here, take this whole disk. It's all ready for you, right? Now let's get to the comment from Demon Windu. Demon Windu gave a comment here about this model, this old model, and the names I had, okay? And he didn't like the names. Now, I have an old video from at least, I think about a year, if not more than a year ago. I'll put the link in the description as well, where I tried to name the Quadra, right? I didn't even know they were called Quadra. I just discovered them on my own. They weren't even ordered by Alpha, Beta, Gamma. I just discovered, I said, hey, look, this is the model that OP is saying exists. And I said, hey, let's name them. Let's name these coins. I called them coins at the time, not Quadra. So I used entropy. In the video, I talked about entropy and how, you know, there's going to be this high entropy information coming in. I didn't say worldview yet, but yeah, it's producing this worldview and it's reducing the entropy outside. So what are we leaving behind? So first of all, it's in an alpha state, okay? I'm talking about not an INFP. I'm talking about a delta quadra, someone who's using all of their functions, all of their animals, who's reducing entropy and reducing entropy in the world, taking in this high entropy and producing something, leaving a legacy behind, right? So this is this alpha state. So I gave them names there, and I said there, hey, if anyone has, it's not set in stone. If anyone has a different name, just let us know, right? So like, let's say the Council of Delta Quadra come to me and they say, hey, Benjamin, you know, we don't like the name systematizers. It doesn't really define us, describe us properly. We want to be called the Pickle Ricks. Well, I'll be like, okay, well, you know, your decision. You guys are the Deltas. Sure, let's call you Pickle Ricks. I wanted to call you based on what kind of low entropy legacy you're leaving behind to society, but we can call you the Pickle Ricks. Why not? And let's say the Council of Beta Quadra. I'm part of the Beta Quadra, but they outvote me, they outrank me. The Council of Beta Quadra say, hey, we don't want to be called the revolutionaries. That's not who we are. We're the conformists. And I'll say, well, I disagree, but sure, if all of y'all think you're conformists, I'm just going to have to write down conformists for Beta Quadra, right? So basically, that's the video there. That's the interpretation. I still think it's very accurate. You can see systematizers, right, versus revolutionaries. They're at odds. They're at odds. You need both in society. You need to revolutionize systems, and you need to systemize revolutions, right? But they're opposites, right? Here, they're not quite opposites, but the innovators need directors to bring the innovation, and the directors need innovators to give them something to direct, right? So there is kind of an opposite thing there that I just noticed now when preparing this video. So anyway, that's cognitive entropy in a nutshell. I only glossed the surface. I'm still processing it. It's going to take many more years for me to get more videos on this subject out, but it's this all-pervasive thing. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it left you with some kind of value. Anyways, have a good one. Peace. I'm going to stop the share first and then stop the recording. Bye.